Broadcasting live from the Capital OTB studios, this is Racing Across America with Seth Merrow.
We would like to thank Woodbine for their sponsorship of this program and some of the other programming and events here at Capital OTB. Woodbine's 2023 Thoroughbred Stakes program has more than $17 million in purses, including 39 graded stakes, 5 Grade 1 events, and 2 $1 million classics, the King's Plate and the Woodbine Mile. Woodbine, now through December, great racing north of the border. Good morning and welcome to Racing Across America on this Saturday morning, kicking off a Memorial Day weekend. And it is the week after the middle jewel of the Triple Crown, the Preakness Stakes. So we'll have a little Preakness conversation, but a little bit later on. Also, it's a weekend of big stakes races around the country. So a little bit later on, we'll be joined by Ellis Star, national racing analyst for Equibase, and we'll look at some of today's stakes action as we, as I say, kick off the nice holiday weekend of racing. But again, the week after, a little Preakness recap conversation. I thought we'd reach out to our friend Tim Wilkin. He was down at Pimlico as part of the notes team for the Maryland Jockey Club with, I believe Mike Kane was there. I saw Joni Lawrence walking in the park yesterday, and she said she was down there as well. Of course, Dave Joseph and the team. And so got Tim to come on this morning to talk a little Preakness recap. Tim, good morning.
Good morning, Seth. Happy Saturday.
Yeah, it was like, looking at the various press people who are down there. It was like old home week. It was kind of the Saratoga press box moved south.
It was. Mike Kane, as you mentioned, was down there. I was there. Phil Janak works for the Maryland Jockey Club. He was there. And, there was the guys from Florida that came up too. Eddie Gray, who used to work at the Boston Herald. Clark Spencer used to work at the Miami Herald. We had a whole plethora of people running around getting the quotes. It's sort of different from, when the best thing is, because once you do your work, you're done. You don't have to write a story. You give them the quotes, and that's all she wrote. But it's a busy day because, there was, on Saturday there were 10 stakes that we had to cover, and on Friday there were 6. And so you have to go and talk to people after each race. And, normally if you're writing for a publication, you're not doing every race, but we had to do them all. But it was fun. It was fine. And, got to see a lot of pretty good racing.
Yeah, it was 2 nice days of racing. There's no question about it. We'll hit on some of those in a few minutes. But again, just want to talk a little bit about the general atmosphere down there, because also being part of the notes team, you were down days early and going around the backstretch and whatnot. I had Frank Vespi on last Sunday, and we were talking a little bit in recap, and he covers Maryland racing. We talked a little bit about, Maryland racing now in a little bit of flux. And I'm just wondering, as you bounced around there last week, could you get a feel for what the folks in Maryland are thinking and feeling right now? As it really does. I said last week, I said earlier this morning, it seemed a couple of years ago like Maryland racing had kind of righted the ship and was moving in the right direction. And now it seems to have gone off course a little bit again. Did you get a feel for that while you were down there?
Well, it's like you said, it's a difficult situation down there. The people there that put on the show are phenomenal.
Yeah.
They bend over backwards to accommodate media. They do their best to accommodate fans, even though, tickets are a little pricey. I mean, if you want to go to the Preakness, you're going to have to pay money. But then again, you want to go to any major sporting event, you're going to have to pay to go. I mean, the days of paying $20 to get into a sporting event, they probably left in the 1960s. I mean, everybody, you have to pay to go into these big events. But, so then you'll get a lot of people say, well, heck, I'll just stay home and bet on my phone. I don't have to be at the track. And that was represented in the attendance. I mean, they did not release a Preakness Day attendance. They released a 2-day combined attendance for Black Eyed Susan Day and the Preakness, and they topped it off at 65,000 for the 2 days. I mean, it used to be back in the day. I mean, even from 2011 up to 2019, before the pandemic, there'd be over 100,000 people there just on Preakness Day. So yeah, there's a big drop off in the people that are going to the race. They'll say it's by design because they want to have a better experience for the people that go. And they really trying to cater to the young fans by putting the concerts together. I mean, this year it was Bruno Mars, and that concert didn't start until like an hour after the Preakness card was over. So, and you couldn't just come to the concert; you had to be there. You couldn't just show up after the race card was over and say, "I want to listen to Bruno Mars." You had to be there. So I think they had, estimating, I think there was like 5,000 people that watched that show, and they all got wet because it started raining pretty good about 45 minutes to an hour after the running of the Preakness. But it's not like it used to be. I mean, even media-wise, there were very few mainstream media people there. As far as newspapers go, the Daily Gazette, Mike McAdam was there. The Buffalo News, Gene Kirshner was there. New York Times was there. The LA Times was there. But then the Baltimore papers were there. The Louisville paper came. But it used to be you'd have papers, representatives from everywhere in the country. And that's just fallen off. It's, that's the way it is at the Derby too. It's just the way that the business is for that. You just don't see as much media going to these events anymore. But, Pimlico is Pimlico. It's got its rustic charm to it. The building's falling apart, but they put on the show. And, I think anybody that was there had a good time because that's what they strive to do down there.
Yeah, and the horse people have certainly said that they're treated very well, and it was 2 fun days of racing. And you mentioned the weather maybe turned a little bit after the races on Saturday, but looking at the predictions where it was a little bit dicey, earlier in the week, a little bit dicey both days perhaps, but it turned out both days of racing, the weather was gorgeous. And I see you tweeted out Preakness Day itself, a little overcast early, but then maybe midday or so, you tweeted a nice sunny picture. So it turned out to be, as far as the weather, 2 great days of racing as well.
It did. On Saturday, it was overcast, and the threat of rain was there. They were thinking that it might rain right about the time the Preakness ran. But then in the afternoon, the sun came out, and it got actually pretty pleasant. It wasn't hot like it can be in Baltimore, but it was perfect conditions for racing. And on this day, God must have been a racing fan because he held off the rain until afterwards. He's had his moments when he'll let the skies come down pretty hard, like he did during American Pharaoh's Preakness in 15 when it was just brutal.
Yeah, and again, with the two nice days weather-wise, that always plays well to racing and racing fans because you think we're getting fair races now, and let's jump into it and take a look at the Preakness. We'll watch the stretch run here. It'll be number 1, National Treasure, over number 7, Blazing Sevens, and they put on quite the stretch duel. Mage with the early pace. Mage is going to be the number 3 horse, and it makes a run, and it's just with the early pace, just couldn't do much. I played around with Perform. That one disappointed me and ran 6th in the field of 7. I thought off the Tessio and the fact that they put up the money, Shug and the connections, I thought Perform could be interesting, not so much so. But again, we're watching the stretch run here, and as they get to the wire by a head with Johnny Velasquez on board, National Treasure gets it done. And I think I also pulled up some video from your Twitter feed. You've got him getting a bath the morning after. But talk a little bit about your thoughts, National Treasure, and the Preakness performance.
Seth, as soon as that race was over, every one of the connections of the beaten horses were just saying, John Velasquez, John Velasquez, John Velasquez, because he stole that race. He got the pace that he wanted, and nobody could close into it. Blazing Sevens made a really nice run, but he was wide, and Chad was saying after the race that he thinks that wide trip took some starch out of his horse. He's probably right. When Chad won the race last year with early voting, and then in 17 with cloud computing, he had the perfect trips. He didn't get the perfect trip this time. But this one, I was standing in the paddock watching the race with the Baffert entourage, and they were just giddy as all heck when they were posting those early fractions, 23 and 4 and 48 and 4. They were like, and what 6 furlongs, 113. They were loving their chances then. And then when the race in the final into the stretch, National Treasure was not going to let Blazing Sevens get by him. I mean, it was a gutty, gritty, such a smart ride by John Velasquez. I mean, and his first Preakness win in his 13th start, so well deserved, and what a great ride he gave. And that's why he's in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, and I mean, just this portion of his career has just been amazing to watch over the past 2 or 3 years. And again, it was a nice stretch duel. Give me your thoughts after the first couple of legs of the Triple Crown. Mage winning. He was so lightly raced going into the Derby, I couldn't pull the trigger there, but he looked great. And again, the pace didn't play to him last Saturday. But I have said now, 2 races into the Triple Crown, I'm thinking this 3-year-old class may be a little bit set to beat each other and maybe define themselves later when they can face older horses in the fall. Potentially somebody steps up in the summer, Haskell, Jim Dandy, Travers, Pennsylvania Derby, and maybe adds a little luster to their resume. But it seems like after the first couple jewels of the Triple Crown, this 3-year-old class, there isn't anybody really stepping up. Maybe it'll be Forte, because we didn't get to see him so far in the first 2 jewels. But what are you making of the 3-year-old class after the Derby and the Preakness?
It's sort of after watching those 2 races, it's sort of a big blah. Blah. Yeah. I mean, Mage, it was a great story for racing, but like you, I couldn't get past the 3 starts going into the Derby. And I'm certainly, if I didn't bet him at 15-1 in the Derby, I'm certainly not going to bet him at 7-5 in the Preakness. He's a good story. And the fact that he's going to rest now for a little bit, and their major goal right now is the Travers, which is good for the people around here, because it's the Travers has the potential. It's still a ways away, but if all these horses stay together, it could be the best 3-year-old race of the year. And as far as a horse stamping himself as the leader of the division kind of deal right now, I don't know who it would be. I mean, I still think Forte.
Yeah.
I vote in the NTRA poll. I still put Forte on top because I think he's right now still the best 3-year-old. But you go back to like 2013 when Will Take Charge did nothing in the Triple Crown races, and he became the 3-year-old champion for Wayne Lucas. That's because he had a great summer and fall. So maybe the best 3-year-old hasn't established himself yet. But I think it's a competitive group, and I think the Belmont, if they all show up that are pointing to it, it could separate a little bit more, especially if Forte wins. Because if Forte wins, he's definitely the top 3-year-old. And if National Treasure were to win, providing he goes, and he is in New York right now, Preakness Belmont doubles carries a lot of weight. But as far as saying there's one dominant 3-year-old right now, there isn't. I think Forte has the potential to be that horse, but he's got to prove it at the Belmont, providing he gets there.
Well, and I'll take a look at another race from Saturday, and I know you talked to Bob Baffert over the time down there at Pimlico, but earlier on the card was the Sir Barton, and Arabian Lion, the number 4 horse, is going to get it done under John Velasquez. But I'll note, and I have the page here with the buyers from last Saturday, Arabian Lion wins the Sir Barton with a 103 buyer. National Treasure wins the Preakness with a 98. So the best 3-year-old on the day may have been in the 4th race on Saturday.
Yeah. Seth, it's funny. When Baffert was coming into the winner's circle area from the paddock where he watches the races, he looked at me and he said, I should have run him in the Preakness. And he was laughing, but there's maybe something to that. I mean, that 4-length win he had was ultra impressive. And I think that had he gone in the Preakness, would he have won? I don't know. Who knows? The way John Velasquez rode National Treasure, maybe no one was going to beat him that day, but it certainly would have put spice into it. And it's interesting. It'd be interesting to see what happens with Arabian Lion now, because Bob shipped National Treasure to New York, but Arabian Lion went back to California, which would seem to me that I don't know if he's going to want to ship him back to New York. If he was going to run him, if he was thinking about running him in the Belmont, I think he would have gone to New York from Baltimore. And, it's a mile and a half, and maybe he doesn't want to go that far. But, right now, National Treasure, I would assume, would be there. And I don't know what he's going to reincarnate also. The Derby could also end up in New York, I suppose, for the Belmont. But yeah, Arabian Lion was ultra impressive. And Bafford's best 3-year-olds, are on the Arabian Night and Cave Rock, who were his kind of his number 1 and 2 draft picks, heading into the spring races. They're supposedly coming back in the summer. So I don't know where and when, but that's the plan he wants to have. Arabian Night could show up in the Travers, which would, even spice that one up even more, because he was considered the top 3-year-old for a while this year before things didn't work out the way they wanted to.
Yeah, Arabian Lion had a very funny career, though. The winner of the Sir Barton that we just saw started the career with the win to begin the career, and then didn't have a win in 4 starts, but got back on track on Saturday. So it's just a funny group of 3-year-olds that he's had and how it's played out so far. That said, also have to mention, and I know, as I say, you were talking about Baffert during the day and whatnot, but a little bit earlier on the card, the breakdown of having a meltdown and obviously the highs and the lows of the game, winning the Sir Barton, winning the Preakness, and then the breakdown of having a meltdown. What was the reaction with the Baffert connections to the day?
That was just the ultimate gut punch for them. I mean, again, as soon as that horse went down, he went back to the barn. He was distraught. His wife, Jill, and he walked back through the crowd and then went to the barn, and I followed because I had to talk to him. And I got to talk to him just outside the barn after he got back, and he was emotionally wrecked. The thing, Seth, that is just sad and maybe a little unfair, and people are going to just jump all over it because it's Bob Baffert. They're saying because of his past, they're going to think that something was wrong with this horse. The horse took a bad step. It's not like this horse was. There was. I'm assuming that Bob. It doesn't. He's not. No one's going to put illegal things into a horse before a big race like this because they check them so much. It was just an unfortunate situation when the horse went down because it was Bob Baffert. You never want to see a horse go down in any situation, but because it was Baffert, it was magnified 1,000% more. Yeah,
there is no question about that immediately upon that happening. And so there was a whole mix for racing fans as well. There was a mixed reaction to the day. Let's go back, and I'd love some opinions on Friday as well. And speaking of Baffert, Feza had to put a little bit of a disappointing spin on the weekend as well. In the Black-Eyed Susan, Feza was the 3-5 favorite. We're going to watch the stretch run. She's going to be the number 9 and winds up 3rd. That said, nice performance from Tax, who I think throws herself into the 3-year-old filly conversation, but also a storyline out of the Black-Eyed Susan, the rebound for Who's Your Filly, who was showed so much potential last year, but it started the 3-year-old season in a disappointing fashion. She runs 2nd, though, so I think it was a nice little rebound for Who's Your Filly. What were your thoughts on Friday's Black-Eyed Susan?
Just about, with Feza came in, and she looked great. I mean, she looked absolutely phenomenal. Maybe she wasn't beating much when she was out in California, and the fact that she, these two gray fillies put on a pretty nice show for, Tax, the owners from Omaha, Nebraska, and this was, I believe, his first graded win. And he's toying the idea of maybe bringing this one to Saratoga this summer. And, who's your filly? Maybe Tommy Amos should have, pumped the brakes a little bit when he was, touting this filly early on, talking Kentucky Derby and how this horse was the second coming of Pegasus, which is unfair to do to a horse. Who's your filly is a nice filly, but, let's let her sort herself out with her own before we start, making these comparisons and saying how great she's going to be. It was really a nice comeback for her to run second in that, because she'd been very much a major disappointment up after this year. Yeah, those last two starts. So I think that puts her on the right track, and maybe she comes. Maybe we see her in Saratoga. There's no doubt she's got talent. But the thing too with Tax, it's a win for the little guy. Randy Morse, he's not in the, you don't see his name in the same company like the Todd Pletcher or Chad Brown. It's nice to see one of the little outfits win a big race. So I think that horse has a future. She surely showed it on the Black Eyed Susan.
Yeah, I agree. I think that she firmly put herself into a conversation in the division. Speaking of which, I also want an opinion on the Pimlico Special, because I think Rattle and Roll for Kenny McPeak. And he said he's maybe looking at a stake at Churchill and then up to Saratoga. So Rattle and Roll would be no surprise at Saratoga. But I think being kind of last year, a second division stakes level 3-year-old, I think so far this year, Rattle and Roll has kind of made a name for himself as a potential player in the handicap division. Won at Fairgrounds in the New Orleans, or ran well in the New Orleans Classic, but had a 100 buyer figure. Then won the stake at Keeneland with a 101. And we're going to watch the stretch run here. Rattle and Roll is going to be the number 2 horse in a very nice stretch duel with Speed Bias. Has to work for it, but Rattle and Roll gets it done with the third consecutive triple-digit buyer. So I thought Rattle and Roll, as I say in the Pimlico Special, stepped up and stamped himself as an interesting player in the handicap division.
He certainly did. And, Kenny's got another one that could make some noise in there and Smile Happy. Yeah. Remember him last year was really touted as a 3-year-old, and he's come back and he's won his last start. And I think that he could be a player in this division too. But I really did feel bad for Ron Moquette because, Speed Bias ran a winning race. And, when I was talking to Ron afterwards, he thought he'd won. Kenny wasn't sure he had won. It was that close. I thought from watching it, my naked eye, I thought Speed Bias had held on. But a gutty win for Rattle and Roll. But, you got to give credit to Speed Bias, too, because both those horses, neither one of them deserved to lose. It was that impressive of a performance by both of them.
Totally agree. And that was one of just a few really, really nice performances, really nice ding-dong stretch battles on the weekend that came down to that kind of a decision. Always fun when there are races like that. One more I wanted to talk about, because obviously there are New York connections here. But on Friday, the Miss Preakness, Maple Leaf Mel for Bill Parcells and Jeremiah Engelhardt steps out of New York bred company. We're going to watch the stretch run here to the Miss Preakness. She's going to be the number 6 horse and get it done by a length and a half. Fourth career start. The coach, Bill Parcells, has a really nice New York bred. And when you have a really nice New York bred who does what she does, as we're watching here, and wins an open company, there are just all kinds of options going forward. But that was fun to see Maple Leaf Mel win on Friday.
And she did it so easily. Yeah. And the great thing about the great backstory on that, the filly is named for Melanie Giddings, who is a former assistant to Jeremiah, who's actually out on her own now, but still does work with this horse. And Melanie is a cancer survivor, and she's very young. She survived cancer. she's from Canada. Hence the name Maple Leaf Mel. Parcells wanted to name the horse for her. And, you know, she's back in Saratoga now. And it's just that she's done everything in all 4 of her starts so effortlessly. I mean, the sky might be the limit for what she can do. And it would be really cool to see her step out of state bred class this summer and really do some good in the filly ranks. It would just be a phenomenal story.
Yeah,
and Melanie's such a nice person too.
And you know, being Jeremiah and Bill Parcells, certainly we'll see that one up in Saratoga.
Oh yeah, she's there now. I mean,
Yeah.
she ran back there. I think the day after the Miss Preakness, and you know that's Jeremiah's base. That's where he is all summer, and you know that horse will be there now and be training and for the next spot. I'm going to be anxious to see what spot that'll be.
Yeah, it should be fun. Again, it was a great 2 days of racing, and as we kind of alluded to, has some play into our neck of the woods as well, as we'll see some of these horses certainly in their various divisions up at Saratoga. Looking forward to that. In the meantime, still the Belmont Stakes to go, and a little bit of summer before we really shift our focus to Saratoga, but that will happen sooner rather than later. And Tim Wilkin will be involved in plenty of that action as well. But Tim, we appreciate the visit this morning, the conversation, and again, we'll talk again.
I do appreciate being on with you, Seth, and we all know that what happens on July 13th for us is that summer is over.
It's funny you say that, because once the weather gets nice, I mean, people recognize me from television. So I'll be in the gas station, in the supermarket. You ready for the track? You ready for the track? And that's kind of what I say. I say, I want a little summer before the track starts, because then it goes very fast after that. So that said, we're all looking forward to it.
No question. The best time of the year.
Yeah. Tim, appreciate it. Have a good day.
Thank you, Seth. You as well.
Tim Wilkin joining us again. He was part of the notes team last week down at Pimlico for the Preakness. So I thought, you know, a week after, want to just keep up, because we are in the midst now. There's no Triple Crown on the line, but this 3-year-old crop still has to define itself, because at this point it really is undefined. We'll see if it happens this summer, or as I say, it may not be until the fall till they face some of the older horses. All right, we'll take a break. Again, started things out looking back, a little review, but coming up, a little preview. We'll have Ellis Star join us, the national racing analyst for Equibase, and more. We'll take a look at some of the stakes action this afternoon, kicking off a big stakes weekend on this Memorial Day holiday weekend. Ellis Star, right after this. Stay tuned. It only takes one upset to make history, and now you can be part of Saratoga's long tradition at the Dark Horse Mercantile. The Dark Horse Mercantile offers a carefully curated selection of clothing, gifts, and home decor, from one-of-a-kind vintage racing memorabilia to select brands like Barber and Under Armour, as well as exclusive Dark Horse branded merchandise. So celebrate the Dark Horse in all of us at the Dark Horse Mercantile, downtown Saratoga, where the smart bet is always the Dark Horse. Capital OTB is now streaming live on Roku. The RTN Racing channel on Roku lets you watch OTB TV live through your Roku device or your Amazon Fire Stick, rather than being limited to computers and mobile devices, which means you can now watch OTB live wherever you are. Simply open Roku, scroll to find the RTN channel, then click on OTB TV. OTB TV on Roku. Try it now. Welcome back to Racing Across America. And as promised before the break, we are joined now by our friend Ellis Star, national racing analyst for Equibase and more. Ellis, good morning.
Good morning, Seth. Good morning, racing fans.
Wanted to bring you on because, again, Memorial Day weekend, annually, traditionally a big stakes weekend. So we'll talk some of the stakes today, but of course, big stakes tomorrow, big stakes on Monday with a lot of the major venues running, but we'll see if we can kick people off with some ideas for Saturday afternoon. But before we do that, obviously the week after the second jewel of the Triple Crown, we'd love some ideas. And I haven't talked to you since Derby time either. So maybe give some thoughts. We talked about it already a little bit this morning on both of the programs. To me, after the Derby and the Preakness, the 3-year-old scene is a little bit undefined. I think it's a 3-year-old crop that may not define themselves until they face older in the fall, but there is still a potential. Belmont, Haskell, Jim Dandy, Travers, Pennsylvania Derby. Maybe somebody steps it up, but what are your thoughts? Mage after the Derby, National Treasure after the Preakness. Your thoughts so far after the first 2 jewels of the Triple Crown?
Well, first, your comment about them sorting themselves out as we get into the summer is going to be true here, because we had, a lot of defection the Derby week, and then we had the Derby, which was pretty good. If Forte scratched and the horse that ran second, Mage won at a big price pretty much, and kind of ignored, because as second place horses normally are, particularly if the winners are in that race. And we talk about that a lot. The second place horses in the preps get completely underbred versus the winners of those races. And in this case, with Forte running, it would have definitely been the case. It was surprised he was still as high as he was in terms of odds after Forte scratched. And then National Treasure winning the Preakness, in a walk. I mean, the strategy was go to the lead. You have the rail, see how slow you can go, and you got away with it. I'm not knocking him, but 49-113. He took away any sting. It's kind of was 1, 2, 3 around the track, except for Coffee with Chris, I guess, for a while. So, don't see much, but I am looking at the summer because you've got the horses coming back now. Tap the Trice working well. Forte will be back. We're going to have some, I like to say, better, at least better than the Preakness. Derby was exciting, better than the Preakness perhaps all summer long. And they will mature. And maybe if you get a horse that wins 2 or 3 of these out of the big 4 races during the summer, you're going to get a horse going into the fall that we're really talking about, maybe even more than we're talking about right now.
Yeah, I think it will be a fun summer to see if somebody can step it up. But as I say, I'm kind of feeling now like we're not going to define things. I just have a feeling they're going to continue with this beating each other through the summer. But that clearly is no sure thing. Somebody could step in, particularly Forte, if he comes back, and we'll see what he does.
And if they do keep beating each other, I mean, to that extent, we're going to get some value in those races.
Yeah.
So you got one hand, you want to see a big horse. On the other hand, if they keep taking turns, you're going to get horses at 5, 6, 7, 8 to 1 that maybe lost their last race and all of a sudden run a big one. So from a betting perspective, I don't mind that kind of chaos.
Yeah, that's a great point as well. Any thoughts on some of the undercard stakes? I mentioned we talked to Tim Wilkin just a few minutes ago. He in kind of Preakness Black-Eyed Susan Day recap, and I mentioned going to Black-Eyed Susan Day. I think Rattle and Roll kind of stepped himself into the handicap division picture nicely. I thought Tax ran well and put herself maybe into the 3-year-old filly division picture. Any thoughts on the weekend as a whole and some of the other performances?
Well, unfortunately, the race that was really impressive to me was the one that was marred by the breakdown.
Oh, Rivet?
Rivet. I mean, Rivet ran really well. I mean, he just battled the entire way. And I think Asmussen's got a really nice 3-year-old sprinter there. And we've got those races coming up, not the Net Mile, but I can't remember, the 3-year-old stake that runs during Saratoga, and some of the others coming up. I mean, you got a really good sprinter there for Asmussen and Rivet, and I think he could be something special.
Gee, Steve Asmussen with a nice 3-year-old sprinter. Who would have thought?
That's right. That's the first time it's ever happened.
All right, Ellis, let's jump into this afternoon, and we'll take a look at some of the stakes action across the country. I have a little Monmouth, a little Churchill, a couple of races out at Santa Anita. Let's start things out at Monmouth in the Cliffhanger. $100,000 up for grabs, mile and a 16th on the grass. Interesting field in here. James Aloysius is intriguing to me at 6-1 on the morning line off a couple of good efforts. Big Everest is the 8-5 favorite for Christophe Clement, and probably interesting there. But I'll tell you what, at 20-1, the Kathleen O'Connell runner, Sir Saffir, I think is intriguing, coming up from a nice race at Tampa. And it seems to me like the Tampa horses this year, as they've moved out to other venues, have kind of validated themselves nicely. So the 4 horse is intriguing to me, Sir Saffer. But what did you see in the cliffhanger this afternoon?
Well, I never took anybody off a horse 20-1, even if it wasn't a horse that I considered. But I will say that, at this point, the 3-year-old rules apply. And even though this is a listed stakes, a non-graded stakes, I really would like to avoid a horse that is only a non-winner of 1X winner, even though he has 4 wins. But he won a starter. He seems a little cheap. He broke his maiden and maiden claimer. But certainly if you're getting 21, you should take it. I'm really all over Sky's Not Falling here, the 3-horse. He leads the field in career wins with 6, tied actually with Big Everest. Big Everest is 8-5, and Sky's Not Falling is 6-1. Second last time out in the he actually won a classified allowance at Laurel, so it's like stakes level, and he was ridden out in that race. He made a really nice rally, 5-2-1. He also won at Gulfstream back in December with a rally from 5th. I think he'll lead mid-pack here. He gets decent amount of speed. Big Everest looks to be a lone front runner on the lead, but I'm not sure they're going to let him get away with it. Your horse, you mentioned Sir Saffer, just went 46-8 or pressed 46-8. Big Everest runs about 47. Maybe he'll go. James Aloysius, you mentioned, might go. I'm really looking just for a win bet here, Seth. I think 2-1 or better on Sky's Not Falling is good. I think I will play an exact the box with the favorite, because if he does get loose on the lead, he could be really tough. Other horses you might want to consider for exactas, just exact the boxes, or maybe even Sky's Not Falling on top. As you said, James Aloysius, Smokin' Tea, who's hit the board in 4 out of his last 5 from Sugar Gahey. You mentioned Sir Saffer already, and Public Sector for Chad Brown, who's 2-1, which is good because he's going to be overbet. I don't like him a bit at all. I might defensively use him in exactas, but it looks like Sky's Not Falling could be a nice play here.
Yeah, Big Everest is the 8-5 morning line favorite, but Public Sector 2-1, and I think you're exactly right. Chad Brown and Klarovich, this one's going to take some action certainly, but I'm with you. I mean, we're looking at a horse that last year 0-for-6, but with those connections, we'll take some money. It's a fun race, and I think there's the potential there to make a little money.
And let me add. I'm sure I know you talk about it. I talk about it. When you look at a race, you look at the favorite, first or second favorite. In this case, Public Sector, 2-1. You always going to be bet. But you look at a horse that's got no wins, no seconds, and 3/3 last year, and coming back from a 7-month layoff. I mean, that's a great race to bet right away because you just got rid of one of the favorites.
Yeah, no question about it. All right, that's the 7th at Monmouth today, the cliffhanger. Let's move over to Churchill Downs, the Cartana. I handicapped Churchill on the handicapping show earlier this morning, so I have a little bit of an opinion in here. In a race that I think is interesting, I'm 5, 9, 10, and 7. The 5, Miss Yearwood, 6-1. The 9, Talbea, is 12-1, and I think that horse is a little bit playable for Mark Cassie. But we're going to take a look at the allowance event from April 26th over at Keeneland and watch Miss Yearwood win, the number 2 horse, at this 1.5-mile distance. And I think off of that race, she's playable in here to 6-1 morning line. So I went in that direction. But what did you see in the Cartana this afternoon?
Well, we were really close. You said 5, 9,
10, 7. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And I'm 5, 12, 10, 7. So
Okay.
Miss Yearwood is my top pick. I think you're absolutely right. It's interesting. The breeding was only fair for grass. We'll take charge of Awesome Again mare. And Ian Wilkes really, last year they took their shot, as they do with 3-year-olds, males and females, took their shot going from maiden to the Black-Eyed Susan. She matured late in the year. And then she ran in the Monomoy Girls on the dirt. And then they tried turf last summer, and boom, boom, boom. She won an allowance race at Ellis Park. Then she shipped up to Aqueduct for the Yacht Club's Oaks with $1 million with McCulloch, and she got third at 20-1. Took 6 months off, and you expect her to be a little short first time back, and she was in March. And then 6th again in the Orchid, but that last race put her all together again, and she holds her form. She went 2nd and 1st last year in the Monomoy Girl in that allowance race. She went 2nd and 1st last spring, April, when she ran 2nd and 1st in her maiden races, all routes. She's bred to run all day. So I think 6-1's a very square price, and you don't like the fact that, again, she's won 2 of 5 since switching to the turf. It was all dirt, and now it's all turf. The interesting long shot here that you didn't mention was Viburnum, the 12. I'm a big fan of Kelsey Danner. I think she takes really good care of the few horses she has. This horse is bred by quite a prominent owner breeder in Dee Dee McGahey. And she may not be the best horse to win, but she is 12-1, and she's 10 for 21 first or second, 9 for 19 first or second on grass. Her last race is why she's a big price. She was 21 in the Orchid, but interestingly enough, Miss Yearwood was 8-1 in the Orchid. She ran 6th. Viburnum ran 7th. Miss Yearwood came back to win. Viburnum didn't, but Viburnum also been off 4 months. So this is her second back from a layoff, but she ran 2 really good races last year on the grass. Mile and 5/16 at Kentucky Downs under Beskiza, who gets back on, and she ran second at Churchill also last June. So I think she's got a big shot for the exacta here. 10 Sparkle Blue is one of yours as well, and certainly she's second off a long layoff. She's dropping in class kind of from a grade 3 to listed, but this is a $225,000 race. It's really the same level. But she won the Valley View last year, first time going a mile and a half, but she's got the breeding for it with Smart Strike on the bottom, and she's a granddaughter of Danzig. And then the 7 Lovely Princess for Kenny McPhee coming off a mile late win, also stretching out. But I really like Miss Yearwood here as a win bet. Viburnum probably a smaller win bet, and I like that 4 trifecta box.
Well, now your long shot the 12, my long shot the 9. I got to box up 12 and 9 at least now to just because I don't want to be sitting on the sideline when that happens. All right, some interesting ideas there in the Cartana. Now we move out to the West Coast. Santa Anita, a couple of stakes today. They've got a big weekend, certainly. They have some grade 1s coming up on Monday, but we'll kick things off with the Daytona and the Triple Bend. We'll start it with the Daytona. This is a grade 3 event, downhill 6.5 downhill turf course, 6.5 furlongs. Prince Lancelot, the European runner, I thought was a little bit interesting in here. Obviously, what makes Sammy run is the interesting player as far as the morning line coming off a stakes win over this course. Fast Buck, I think, is intriguing. Burn and Turf, they're all short prices. But again, if I was shopping around, I think maybe the European import a little bit intriguing in here. What did you see in the Daytona?
Well, there's 2 ways to look at this race. Yes, it is kind of low price, chalky, so to speak. I like the 8th race a lot, which we're going to get to. So there's doubles to play here. But other 2 favorites, Fast Buck for me, anywhere near 5-2 is a play because he is the lone speed by far at 6.5. He doesn't get the outside I usually like. Burn and Turf does, and he's got tactical speed. But Fast Buck's last race just blew it away. It was a 111 Equibase speed figure, which is by far the best in the field. He kind of coasted in at 6 on the flat. He hasn't won down the hill yet, but he's 4 for 8. And I like the jockey change here. You talk about Prince Lancelot getting Herrera. Herrera's a good jock, mostly rides at Los Alamitos. He's been okay at the meet and this year, but Hector Berrios is a whole different ballgame, and I have to think connections went to Berrios, who they've only used twice. They're 1 for 2 using Berrios from last year. I got to think because this is a stakes race, they wanted to go for the jock with more experience than the jock that has less wins. So Fast Buck looks really tough here. As I said, Webb McShammy run certainly can run him down. Burn and Turf also can win. I'm going to use all 3 in doubles, but I'm also going to double up on Fast Buck to doubles to my plays in the 8th race. Sounds
good. All right, let's go to the 8th. That is the Triple Bend. A couple $100,000 up for grabs in this grade 2 event. Spirit of McKenna is the 8-5 favorite. Lightly raced, but 3 for 4 so far, including a win in the San Carlos last time. Makes a lot of sense. I know reading your review, you're taking a little bit of a look at Positivity at 15-1. I pulled up a replay just because these horses are such great stories. 9-year-old CZ Rocket, going to run second last time. It was a 3-horse field in an allowance event back on May 13th, but does run second, the number 4 horse here, Dr. Schivel. And again, given that it was May 13th, kind of a quick turnaround for the 9-year-old, and I thought that was a little bit intriguing, but just being a 9-year-old CZ Rocket, we're all familiar with that name popping around the stakes, sprint stakes level for a while now. Forbidden Kingdom also interesting to me. Your thoughts in the Triple Bend?
Well, when I did this race for Equibase Race of the Week, I did it before looking at the odds, and I really thought that Positivity, who I really had a liking to, would be, 6 or 8 to 1. Now I see he's the longest shot on the board at 15, and I really don't get it. I mean, I get the lower odds. I don't get the higher odds. First of all, let's talk about the pace a bit. Forbidden Kingdom has to go. I mean, just a highly touted horse. Remember last year, he won the San Vicente and San Felipe. Then he ran horribly to Taiba, so they skipped the Triple Crown. They run him back in the fall. He ran good. He ran second in the Malibu to Taiba again, and then he ran second in the San Carlos off of almost a 2-month layoff to 2.5-month layoff to Spirit of McKenna in the San Carlos. But Positivity is also a horse that I think they've been very high since the beginning. It didn't cost much. He was, I shouldn't say high. Doug O'Neill claimed him for $20,000 back in July of 21 out of, I think, his 5th start. And he won that race. He got cleaned up by 5. He's never been the claimer since. Took him a couple races to get back. But 7 Furlong seems to be his best trip because he won gamely October of 21. He missed by a nose in a $100,000 stakes. Second in another stakes for Calbred. And then they took him to Dubai this past winter. Not sure exactly why, but they thought maybe they could run some races. But he ran 8th in a Group 3 and then 3rd and 7th. Maybe it was the absence of Lasix, which he's not running on here anyway. But then he comes back from a year and a month off on April 22nd in the Grade 3 Kona Gold, again showing that he's highly regarded. And I think that was a great race. I mean, it was a 5-horse field. He ran on for 30. He wasn't going to get to anybody. Anarchist, who was second, who was 5 lengths in front of him, came back to win. But I like the pattern of second off the layoff. I like the pattern that 7 furlongs, you got 2 wins, 2 seconds, and a third at 7 furlongs. Could easily be 3 wins at 7 furlongs. I just think he's the improving horse here. And if Forbidden Kingdom does his usual thing where he just doesn't have a lot of oomph in the last 8, last time he had the lead and he ran second the entire length of the stretch. Before that, in the Malibu, he basically was 2 lengths back at the top of the stretch, got beaten by 4. Before that, he had the lead and got second, 5th, and Sandy the sprint. I mean, this horse, Forbidden Kingdom's got a lot of speed, but he just does not have it in the last 8. And Spirit of McKenna is going to be close. I think at 15 to 1, Positivity is the horse you got to use. So back in talking about the doubles, I'm using Fast Buck with Positivity, Spirit of McKenna, and then I'll probably play another ticket with Positivity, Spirit of McKenna, Howbeit, and CZ Rocket. CZ Rocket, as you mentioned, is a heck of a horse. At 9, he shows up every time. I don't think he has winning speed figures any longer in him. Second in the Sandy the Sprint last year to Howbeit, second course in the Breeders' Cup, second in a classified Loklon, and second last time out in the classified that 3-horse field to Dr. Scheibel. Spirit of McKenna's got really no knocks. I just like the price on Positivity here, so I'm playing him to win and boxing with Spirit of McKenna, and hopefully we'll get some nice doubles from the second choice in the Daytona Fast Buck.
Yeah, you talked me into it. I hadn't really looked at Santa Anita, but as you were talking, I off of that layoff, I think the 3rd last time may set this one up nicely for a move forward this afternoon. And yeah, it'll be one to take a look and see where the odds do shake out. But certainly at that morning line, or you said you were anticipating maybe more 6, 7, 8 to 1.
Originally, I was.
Yeah.
I think he'll be 10 here. And again, you get the same issue we talked about in the Cliffhanger Stakes with the Chad Brown horse, Public Sector, who's going to be overbet, in my opinion. Forbidden Kingdom's a nice horse, and he certainly has to be used in exactas and trifectas. But I don't think he's 5 to 2 for a win bet because he just doesn't have it in the last 8. So you've got a decent favorite in Spirit of McKenna. You've got a pretty poor, vulnerable second choice in Forbidden Kingdom. So Positivity is still going to be ignored. The third choice is in this race is CZ Rocket, who's a good horse also, but at this point in his career, he's a horse that likes to run second more than first. I mean, he hasn't won since last July, and that was a classified allowance. He hasn't won a stakes in 2 years, I believe.
Yeah, as I say, I like it. I'll jump on a little positive. I'll be positive on Positivity myself a little bit later on. See what I did there? Yeah. Ellis, always appreciate the conversation. Again, you can find Ellis's work at Equibase and beyond. A number of racetracks have his selections up as well. We didn't mention people can go to Woodbine and find your selections as well. I love Woodbine racing.
Yeah, no, I had a couple of nice winners. I did a double. I usually do one race, a double on Thursday. And actually, I hardly ever play the pick 6 when it's not a mandatory payout day, but I put in a $28.20 pick 6, and I had 2 5s, and I got $240 back.
Nice.
So it's actually not a bad play when you got a couple strong opinions on the card. It would.
Excellent, excellent. And I always say they have the picks up there, that 20-cent increment. You can put together a nice ticket, and you would think the 20 cent would take the value out. But if you get a couple of interesting horses, they can still pay very well. Ellis, really appreciate the conversation. As always, we will talk again.
Thank you very much, Seth. Everybody have a great day and make some money.
Appreciate it. Ellis Star, again, national racing analyst at Equibase. Before we wrap up, I pulled up the NTRA three-year-old poll, the NTRA top thoroughbred polls. I thought a little bit interesting to take a look at those. Tim Wilkin mentioned he's a voter on the polls. In the three-year-old poll, no shock, Beige, being the Kentucky Derby winner, sits atop the poll. Forte second. What is interesting is they're separated by a sliver. Total number of points, Mage is number one with 296. Forte is second with 294. National Treasure, after winning the Preakness third, he goes down to 269. And the fact of the matter is, Forte got more first place votes than Mage, but overall, Mage just a couple of points better on top as the Derby winner. Forte second, National Treasure third, two Phils fourth on the NTRA three-year-old poll. Angel of Empire fifth, Blazing Sevens, Practical Move, Tap It Trice, Arabian Lion, and Disarm is 10th. Arabian Lion and Blazing Sevens, and National Treasure. They all moved up from being in the 20s after performances last Saturday. National Treasure, now after winning the Preakness, sits at number 3. He was number 26. Blazing Sevens, second in the Preakness. 6th this week on the poll, was number 20 last week. And Arabian Lion, after winning the Sir Barton last Saturday, now number 9 on the three-year-old poll, was 28 last week. So we did have some horses that moved up significantly with nice performances last Saturday. The top thoroughbred poll overall, Sentimental, number 1 in our hearts and number 1 on the poll, Cody's Wish, 17 first place votes. Clearly the number 1 horse over Elite Power, Proxy third, Clariere fourth, Art Collector fifth, Smile Happy for Ken McPeak, who Tim Wilkin mentioned, and going to be interesting to watch him this year. That one's 6th, Stiletto Boy 7th, Defunded 8th, In Italian 9th, and Caravel, who is headed to Royal Ascot. That'll be fun, certainly. Caravel sits at number 10 on the list. So there's your NTRA polls, top three-year-olds and top thoroughbreds overall for the week. All right, I am going to wrap it up for this Saturday morning. Seth Merrow in for Racing Across America, kicking off the Memorial Day weekend. Again, it's going to be a fun weekend. I'll be back this afternoon, tomorrow as well, and then I'll also be in Monday afternoon because there's some nice racing. They're planning a mandatory rainbow payout at Santa Anita on Monday, so keep that in mind if you're interested in that wager. They also have some nice grade ones out at Santa Anita on Monday as well. New York will be racing on Monday, so looking forward to the Memorial Day afternoon with OTB Live in here. But in the meantime, I'll be back this afternoon. Again, as usual, about an hour and a half or so, 12:30 or so, to take a look at some Saturday afternoon racing here on OTB Live. We'll be back in tomorrow morning for Racing Across America, our usual Sunday show with some recap action and more. Tony Kalo, our regular visitor, with some looks at early week racing at the Finger Lakes. And we maybe I'll reach out to John White. Maybe we'll get some thoughts on Santa Anita for a Monday as well, because again, they have some grade ones out there. But whatever, it will be a fun show tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Mark that on your calendar as far as Racing Across America. But again, we'll be back in just about an hour and a half or so for a Saturday afternoon OTB Live. Stay tuned. We'll see you then. We would like to thank Woodbine for their sponsorship of this program and some of the other programming and events here at Capital OTB. Woodbine's 2023 Thoroughbred Stakes program has more than $17 million in purses, including 39 graded stakes, 5 Grade 1 events, and 2 $1 million classics, the King's Plate and the Woodbine Mile. Woodbine, now through December, great racing north of the border.
You're watching OTB TV, a service of Capital Off Track Betting.